I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you relax after a long day before you drift off to sleep. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now, take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me, because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. I've worked in mines most of my life. You stop noticing the darkness after a while. It becomes something like a companion, something patient, waiting for you to stop pretending you're in control. I used to tell myself the earth wasn't alive, that it didn't care if we carved through its ribs for profit. But sometimes, in the deep hours of a shift, when the machines quieted and the only thing left was the sound of your own breathing, you could almost feel it listening. We were a small crew this time, just 6 of us, assigned to an expansion site roughly 2 miles beneath the surface. The company called it Chamber 9, though it looked like any other tunnel run, silent and endless. My partner Davy was the newest addition, fresh out of training, still eager enough to joke about ghosts and cave monsters. I liked him for that. He made the dark seem less final. The first few days were uneventful. We drilled, we blasted, we reinforced. The usual, but on the 4th day, I started hearing something that didn't belong. It wasn't the echo of tools or machinery, it was softer, rhythmic. 3 dull thuds, faint and distant, like someone tapping from behind a wall of stone. I figured it was just sound distortion. Down here, noises travel strangely. Sometimes they loop back at you, tricking your ears. But the pattern, that's what bothered me. It felt deliberate. That night I asked Davy if he'd heard anything. He looked at me with that smirk of his, the one that said I was overthinking it. Probably just the drills from the next shaft, he said. But we both knew there was no next shaft. Chamber 9 was isolated. We were the only ones working that deep. The next day, the tapping came again. Louder this time, closer. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 more. I stopped working, holding my breath, waiting for it to repeat. When it did, I realized it was coming from below my boots. I crouched, pressing my gloved hand to the ground, and felt a faint vibration, steady and intentional. It was as if someone or something was striking the rock from beneath, I told the foreman. He shrugged it off, said it was a shift in the bedrock. A settling noise, that's what they always called it when they didn't want to scare the crew. Settling, like the earth just needed to get comfortable before swallowing us whole. By the end of the week, 2 more men reported strange sounds. Not just knocking muffled voices, whispers too low to understand. We even shut down the generators one night, just to prove it wasn't mechanical. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on, and in that silence, clear as a heartbeat, came the tapping again. Davy volunteered to check the lower access tunnel. He was confident, almost eager, carrying the portable light and a grin that looked forced in the helmet glow. I followed behind him, the narrow passage pressing in around us. The air was colder there, damp, smelling of iron and dust. After 50 yards, we reached a dead-end, a wall of uncut rock where future work was supposed to begin. That's when the sound came again. Not from ahead, but from inside the wall. A slow, deliberate pounding. Davy looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Someone's in there," he whispered. "Impossible," I said. "That section's never been opened." But the knocks continued, steady as a pulse. He raised his hammer. "If there's an air pocket, maybe." Before he could finish, the wall shuddered. Just once, but strong enough to make dust rain from the ceiling. The light flickered, and in that flicker, I thought I saw something shift behind the stone. A shape, or maybe a shadow. It was gone before I could focus. We backed away. Neither of us spoke the rest of the shift. Later, when we returned to the main chamber, the others said they hadn't heard a thing, that it was probably pressure equalizing. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to. But that night, when I finally lay down in the bunks near the surface elevator, I felt the vibration again, not through the ground this time, but in my chest, as if the mine had learned my heartbeat and was knocking back in perfect rhythm. It started as a faint tremor, so subtle, I thought it was just the hum of the ventilation system. But then the ground gave a low guttural moan. Every man in the shaft froze. You can tell a lot by the way silence spreads underground. When it hits, it's like the earth itself is holding its breath. We all looked at each other, flashlights trembling in the darkened, then the dust began to fall. Little flakes at first, like snow from the ceiling. Then came the rumble, collapse. Someone screamed, but the word barely escaped before the tunnel roared. The world turned white and gray. Dust swallowed the air. The ground buckled under my boots, and I was thrown against the wall. My helmet slammed into the rock. The light flickered and died. For a few endless seconds, I couldn't tell if I was upright, buried, or floating. The only thing I could hear was the scream of stone grinding against stone. When the sound stopped, it wasn't relief that filled the air, it was the absence of it. That kind of silence you feel pressing against your skull. I coughed until I could breathe again, tasting grit and blood. My flashlight flickered weakly, cutting a cone through the haze. The tunnel was unrecognizable. The main passage was gone, just a wall of broken rock and twisted steel. "Davy," I shouted, but my voice cracked. Nothing came back. I scrambled toward where he'd been moments before, but there was only debris-crushed equipment, a fallen beam, and half of a rail line bent like wire. "Davy." No answer, just the slow drip of water seeping from somewhere unseen. I checked my comms. Dead. No signal, no static. Only the faint hum of my own breathing echoing inside the helmet. There was another shaft connected to this one, a narrow maintenance tunnel we'd used earlier that day. If I could reach it, maybe I could find another way out. Maybe he had too. I squeezed through a gap in the rubble, dragging my pack behind me. The air was thicker, the air heavier. The deeper I crawled, the more it felt like the tunnel itself was breathing. Then I heard it, 3 knocks. Soft, measured, coming from ahead. My heart nearly stopped. "Davy." No reply. Just another series of knocks, closer this time. I pressed my ear against the rock. It was cold, but the sound was unmistakable. It wasn't random. It was a rhythm, a message. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. We used that pattern sometimes during drills. It meant I'm trapped, but alive. "Hold on," I yelled. "I'm coming." I began clearing the smaller stones, tearing my gloves in the process. My hands bled, but I didn't care. The knocking continued, steady, desperate. Then, suddenly it stopped. "Davy." Nothing. I waited, counting the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Then came one single knock. Slow, deep. But this time, it wasn't coming from in front of me. It came from behind. I froze. The beam of my flashlight trembled as I turned. The tunnel behind me was empty, just dust swirling lazily in the stale air. "Who's there?" I whispered. Another knock. Louder. This one made the ground vibrate. Then, scratching, faint, irregular, like fingernails dragging along the rock. I started backing away, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But there was nowhere to go, just a maze of tunnels and the weight of the mountain above. The light flickered again. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move, a shape just beyond the reach of the beam. Something human, but not. Then the light went out. Total darkness. I could hear my own breath, fast and shallow. I reached for my backup lamp, fumbling in the dark. My fingers found the switch. A weak glow sputtered to life. The tunnel was empty again. I swallowed hard and pressed on toward the service shaft. Every few steps, I glanced back. Every few steps, I listened. Nothing. When I finally reached the ladder leading up, I felt something like relief. I started climbing, one rung at a time. But halfway up, the metal beneath my boots began to vibrate. 3 knocks. 2 knocks. And this time, they were coming from above. For a second, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The knocks couldn't be coming from above. The service shaft was sealed at the top. We'd welded the hatch months ago to keep it stable. But there they were again. 3 knocks. 2. I froze halfway up the ladder, hand gripping the cold steel. My helmet light shook, sending shadows crawling along the narrow walls. "Davy," I called out, my voice barely a whisper. "Is that you?" The air didn't move. No echo, no dust, no sound until another knock answered. This one, sharper, impatient. Something inside me broke. I started climbing faster, boots clanging against the rungs. metal ringing like a heartbeat. I didn't care what was up there, I just needed to get away from the tunnel, from the dark pressing around me like wet cloth. When I reached the top, the hatch was there, just as I remembered, round, ironed, and locked from the outside. I slammed my fist against it. Help anyone up there? Nothing. Only silence, and the faint vibration of something breathing on the other side. I stopped shouting. Slowly, I pressed my ear to the metal. At first, there was nothing. Then soft, deliberate, came the sound of knuckles brushing against the hatch from the other side. Not knocking, feeling. I climbed down one rung, two, and then the hatch began to turn. It didn't open fast, like something breaking in. It turned slow, steady, as if someone was on the other side taking their time. My light flickered. I couldn't move. My body refused to obey. The hatch groaned open, inch by inch, and a cloud of dust and cold air rolled down the shaft. I looked up, expecting to see light, but there was nothing. Just a rectangle of absolute blackness. Then, a hand appeared. At least, I think it was a hand. The fingers were long, too long, moving in stiff, twitching jerks, the joints bending the wrong way. They curled around the edge of the hatch and held there. No arm, no face, just that shape. Pale as limestone and trembling like it struggled against gravity itself. I couldn't breathe. The hand twitched once, twice, then began to pull downward, slow and careful, as if it was feeling its way toward me. That was enough. I let go of the ladder. The fall wasn't long, but it was brutal. I hit the ground hard, my shoulders screaming in pain. My light shattered, plunging me into darkness again. I scrambled up, half limping, half crawling, back into the main tunnel. My lungs burned with the dust. Somewhere behind me, the hatch clanged shut again, the echo following me like footsteps. For a while, I ran. I don't know how long. The tunnel curved and narrowed, the air growing colder, thicker. My mind told me I was going deeper, not out, but I couldn't stop. Then, from somewhere ahead, came a voice. Hello. It was faint, small, but human. I froze. It was Davy. It had to be. Davy, I'm here. No response. Just the echo of my own words. Davy, and then, laughter. Not loud or manic. Soft, like someone chuckling through a mouthful of dirt. I backed away slowly, my boots crunching over loose rock. The laughter faded, replaced again by those knocks. Closer, faster. All around me now. 3 knocks, 2. 3 knocks, 2. It wasn't coming from one spot anymore. It was echoing through the walls. From above, below, behind. Like the mine itself was repeating it. I reached for the cones again, even knowing they were dead. Anyone, please. I need extraction. I'm not alone down here. Static. Then, through the static, a voice. Low, hollow, familiar. You're late. My stomach turned. It was Davy's voice. Where are you? I asked. Silence. Then the voice again. Closer. You said you'd stay with me. The tunnel lights above flickered once. Twice, then went dark, one by one, receding into blackness like a fuse burning out. The last thing I saw before my light gave out was a shape standing at the far end of the corridor. It was the right height, the right build. The helmet looked like Davy, but the way it moved wrong, slow, dragging, as if every motion was being remembered, not performed. Then my lamp died, and all I could hear was the sound of metal fingers scratching against my helmet. When I woke, I was on my back. Everything was quiet again, too quiet. My helmet light was dead, the air thick as mud in my lungs. For a long time, I didn't move. I couldn't. Every muscle felt carved from stone. My mind was blank, except for one looping thought. Get out. I pushed myself up, blinking in the pitch dark. I had no sense of direction, only the faint metallic taste of blood and dust in my mouth. My radio crackled once, faint, distant, then fell silent again. Hello, I whispered. Anyone? Static. Then a single knock. Not again. Davy. Nothing. Only the slow drip of water somewhere deeper in the mine. I pressed forward, feeling the wall with my hand. The rock was cold, damp. The tunnel began to slope upward, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, I saw light, a faint, golden shimmer ahead. I staggered toward it, half crawling, half walking, my legs shaking under me. Every few seconds, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, matching my own rhythm. Every time I stopped, they stopped too. When I finally reached the opening, it wasn't sunlight that greeted me. It was the harsh white beam of rescue lamps. Voices shouted, hands grabbed me. Someone lifted my helmet off. The light burned my eyes. I remember someone saying, "We got one." Another voice, "Where's the rest of them?" They pulled me out of the tunnel and into the cold night air. Snowflakes drifted through the beams of the searchlights, melting on my skin. I'd never felt anything so clean, so light. They said I was lucky, that the collapse had sealed most of the lower shafts, that anyone trapped below would have suffocated within hours. "Was there anyone with you?" the medic asked. I hesitated. "Davy?" He exchanged a look with one of the others. "We found his helmet. That's all." I didn't answer. They took me to a tent, wrapped me in blankets, and handed me a cup of water. I could still feel the vibration of those knocks in my bones. When I closed my eyes, I saw the hatch turning, the hand. A few days later, they called it a geological event. That was the official phrase, neat, clinical, stripped of everything human. A section of the mine had collapsed, 23 men lost. No survivors beyond the initial rescue. I signed the report. I nodded when they told me to rest. I even smiled for the cameras. When the company rep thanked the bravery and endurance of the crew. But at night, I still hear him. It started faintly, a rhythm. 3 knocks, 2, sometimes from the walls of my apartment, sometimes from the pipes. Once, I woke to find dust falling from the ceiling. Fine, gray, familiar. I told myself it was just stress, survivor's guilt, but then the phone rang. No one on the other end, just the sound of breathing. Slow, wet, familiar. I haven't gone back underground since, not officially, but the company keeps calling. "You're one of the few who knows that section," they say. "We could use your expertise." I always say no. Still, some nights, when the wind moves just right, I swear I can smell it, that dry iron scent of the tunnels. And beneath it, something else. Something alive. Yesterday, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a miner's helmet, scratched, burned, and carved into the side, faint but unmistakable. 322. I dropped it. I didn't open the door for the rest of the day. Tonight, I can hear the knocks again. Closer this time, coming from inside the walls. I try not to look, but the shadows move differently now. They stretch wrong upward, like they're trying to crawl out of the floor. And when I close my eyes, I see him. Davy, covered in dust, eyes hollow, lips moving soundlessly. Sometimes, I think he's asking for help. Sometimes, I think he's asking me to come back. The walls groan. My lights flicker. 3 knocks. 2, and then a whisper right next to my ear. "You left me." It had been raining relentlessly for 3 days. I could hear the thunder echoing in the distance and the pounding of raindrops against the window panes of my countryside cabin. Every flash of lightning lit up the entire living room for a split second, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. I was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, trying to lose myself in a book. But every time thunder cracked, I jumped a little, not out of surprise, but because the sound carried something heavy, something unsettling. When another lightning bolt hit nearby, I noticed one of the windows had come ajar. Rain splashed onto the floor. With a sigh, I set my book aside and stood up to close it. As I peered outside, I saw only darkness stretching endlessly beyond the trees. The forest swayed violently, their silhouettes moving like restless spirits in the night. The storm had swallowed the world whole, leaving only shadows, wind, and the steady whisper of rain. I sat back down near the fireplace, the glow of the flames reflecting in my eyes. The room was warm, but the cold air from outside somehow still crept in, brushing against my neck like a ghostly hand. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was safe here. Alone, yes, but safe. And then, the lights went out. The entire house was swallowed by darkness in an instant. The sudden silence of electricity made the sound of the storm even louder. For a moment, I didn't move. My heart pounded as my eyes struggled to adjust. I could see nothing but faint outlines of the furniture. The dying fire, the endless black around me. My body froze, locked by an old fear I thought I'd outgrown, the fear of the dark. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "It's okay. You just need a candle." So I stood up, trembling slightly, and began walking toward the kitchen. My bare feet made soft sounds on the wooden floor, almost drowned by the rain. I hummed an old song to distract myself, one my mother used to sing to me whenever I was scared as a child. Using the dim light of my phone, I searched through drawers and shelves until I finally found a single candle. Relief washed over me, but just as I was about to light it, my phone rang. The sound shattered the silence so suddenly that I screamed. The candle slipped from my hands, rolling across the counter. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking. It was my mother. "Hello," I said, trying to sound calm. "Darling." Her voice was soft but filled with concern. "Are you all right? What's that noise?" I told her about the blackout, about the storm that hadn't stopped for days. She reminded me to stay calm, to keep warm, to not go outside under any circumstance. Hearing her voice soothed me instantly. She was far away in London, visiting my sister, but at that moment, it felt like she was right beside me. My fear began to fade. When the call ended, I picked up the candle again and finally lit it. The tiny flame flickered weakly, illuminating the corners of the room. My shadow grew long on the wall, stretched, distorted, as if someone else was standing behind me. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. Outside, the wind howled louder than before. The rain came down in thick sheets, drumming against the roof. I moved to the window again and saw the moon faintly, glowing behind the clouds, full, pale, and cold. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. I wanted to believe that maybe, by morning, the storm would end and the world would be calm again. I returned to the fireplace, the candle trembling in my hand. The flicker of the flame cast moving shapes across the ceiling. I sat down, wrapping the blanket tighter around me. I could still hear the rain and wind, but somewhere underneath, I thought I heard something else. A distant noise, a voice. No, probably just the wind. My eyelids grew heavy, and eventually, exhaustion took over. I decided to lie down on the couch and close my eyes for a while. The fire had almost gone out, but the faint orange glow was enough to make me feel safe. As I drifted into sleep, I told myself the same thing over and over again. It's just a storm, nothing else. But I was wrong, because that night was only just beginning. A loud scream shattered the silence. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering in my chest. The fire had long died out, only cold ashes remained. The candle had melted down to a stub. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I had really heard it, or if it was just part of a dream. But then I heard it again. A scream, far away, yet sharp enough to slice through the rain. I sat up slowly, straining my ears. The storm had quieted down. The rain now fell in a steady rhythm, soft but unending. Beyond it, I could hear dogs barking somewhere in the distance. Their howls echoed across the dark valley like warnings carried by the wind. Probably just stray dogs, I whispered to myself, though my voice trembled. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something about that scream had sounded too human, too desperate. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room. For a heartbeat, I saw my reflection in the window, and something else behind it. A shape, small, pale, gone in an instant when darkness returned. I froze, my breath hitched. I couldn't move. I didn't want to look again, but I had to. With shaking hands, I picked up the candle and walked closer to the window. The flame flickered wildly, casting trembling shadows across my face. I took a deep breath, pulled the curtain slightly aside, and looked out. Nothing. Just the rain falling in silver streaks. Just the forest swaying under the moonlight. I let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half exhaustion. My imagination was getting the best of me. It always did, especially when I was alone. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling under my skin. I stepped away from the window and sat back down. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell anymore. The candlelight danced, the rain whispered, and slowly my heartbeat began to settle. Then I heard it again. That scream. This time, closer. It was the cry of a girl, terrified, raw, pleading. I felt my blood run cold. The dogs started barking again, louder now. The entire forest seemed to come alive with the sound of panic. I covered my ears, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real," but it was. I knew it was. The scream turned into sobs, then into silence, and then, knocking, 3 sharp knocks at my door. My body went rigid. Every instinct told me not to move, not to make a sound. I sat frozen, staring at the door, waiting. Another knock, louder, desperate. My hands were shaking so badly. The candle nearly fell from my grasp. "Who's there?" I called out, but my voice came out as a whisper. No answer. Only rain, only wind. I took one small step toward the door, then another. My heart beat so fast it hurt. When I reached for the handle, thunder crashed and I stopped. I couldn't do it. I backed away slowly, trembling from head to toe. The knocks stopped. Silence returned, but I could still feel something. A presence. Right outside the door, watching, waiting. I ran and hid under the table, just like a terrified child. It sounds ridiculous now, but in that moment, it felt like the only safe place left. I sat there, knees to my chest, listening to the rain, to my breath, to the sound of my own heart. Then came the scraping, a faint sound at first, like fingernails dragging across wood, then louder, closer, right at the door. I pressed my hands to my ears. I wanted it to stop. I wanted morning to come. I wanted someone, anyone, to be here with me. The clock on the wall ticked painfully slow, every sound blending with the rain and thunder, and then, silence again. Long, heavy silence. After what felt like forever, I crawled out from under the table. My legs were weak. I couldn't tell if I was still hearing things or if it had truly stopped. Slowly, I stood up, grabbed the candle, and walked toward the door once more. I hesitated. Then, with shaking hands, I unlatched it. The door creaked open. No one. The cold night air rushed in, damp and sharp. The rain had weakened to a drizzle, and everything outside glistened under the pale moonlight. I stepped forward, half expecting something to jump out, but there was nothing, only silence. Then my foot hit something soft. I looked down. A girl, lying motionless on the ground, her clothes soaked in rain, her face covered in blood. The candle slipped from my hand and went out. The candle fell from my hand and vanished into the mud, snuffing out its fragile light. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The only illumination came from the distant lightning that flickered across the sky, bathing the girl's still body in a ghostly blue. She was young, no more than 15, maybe 16. Her hair clung to her face in wet, tangled strands. Blood streaked down her neck, diluted by the rain into faint crimson. Rivers that disappeared into the earth beneath her. I wanted to scream, but no sound left my throat. My knees gave way, and I fell beside her. "Hello? Can you hear me?" My voice was trembling, lost in the storm. I touched her shoulder gently. Her skin was cold, too cold. For a terrifying second, I thought she was dead. But then her fingers twitched. A breath, soft and ragged, escaped her lips. She was alive. My fear shifted into urgency. I slid my arms under her, struggling to lift her frail, soaked body. She was lighter than I expected, her frame trembling as if even unconscious, she could still feel the pain. I brought her inside, closed the door, and set her down near the fire pit. There was no fire left, only gray ashes. Still, it was better than the cold night. I rushed to fetch a towel, anything to dry her off, and found one near the sink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every sound in the cabin, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind through the shutters felt louder, heavier. When I returned, the girl's eyes were open. They were wide and full of terror. She looked at me as though I were another nightmare, crawling out of the dark. "It's okay," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "You're safe here." She tried to speak, but her lips were trembling too hard. I offered her a glass of water. She sipped weakly, then coughed, clutching her chest. When she finally found her voice, it came out broken, almost childlike. "Don't let them find me, please." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I asked. She looked toward the window, where the rain still whispered against the glass. "They'll come back. They said they would." He said I'd never get away. Her eyes darted around the room like a frightened animal, and I could feel her panic filling the air. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't even know what she'd been through. I wrapped the towel around her shoulders and spoke softly. "You're safe. Nobody will hurt you here. I promise." She shook her head violently. "You don't understand. They always come back. They always find us." My heart pounded. "Who are they?" Her answer was almost a whisper, barely audible through the rain. "Men. The ones who take children. They said we had to beg, or they'd..." She stopped, covering her mouth, as if the memory itself was too painful to speak aloud. I felt the air go still. The stories, the screams that the villagers had told me about, the ones people mistook for ghosts, they weren't ghosts at all. They were real. The haunted house, the girls' cries, the mysterious sounds at night, it had all been the echoes of something much darker, a crime hidden under the veil of superstition. I took a deep breath and reached for my phone. No signal. The storm had cut the line completely. My stomach twisted. "Listen," I said gently. "We need to get help. I'll call the police as soon as the network comes back. You'll be safe. I swear it." She nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Then, in a broken voice, she said, "There are others. They're still out there. Please, you have to help them." Her plea hit me like ice. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time, I saw something beyond fear. Hope. Weak, trembling hope, but hope nonetheless. "I will," I promised. "I'll help them all." Thunder rolled again, shaking the windows. For a brief moment, the room flashed bright white. The girl flinched, her eyes darting to the door. I followed her gaze. For just a second, I thought I saw a shadow move across the porch, broad, gone before the lightning faded. My stomach dropped. I got up and slowly walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass. Nothing, just rain and wind. Still, my instincts screamed that we weren't alone. I turned back to the girl, but she was already trembling again, her voice breaking into whispers. "He's here," she said. "He came back for me." The lights flickered once, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed us whole. The world disappeared into blackness. I could hear only the rain pounding against the windows and the thunder rolling through the hills. My heart beat so violently that I thought the sound alone would give us away. "Stay still," I whispered, fumbling for my phone again. The screen glowed faintly, just enough to paint our faces in a ghostly blue hue. No signal. The storm had swallowed everything. The girl clutched my arm so tightly that her nails dug into my skin. "He's here," she breathed, her voice trembling. "He's right outside." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to listen. Between the thunderclaps, I heard a crunch of boots in the wet gravel. Slow, heavy, coming closer. My entire body tensed. The sound moved toward the door. Then, silence. I motioned for the girl to hide. She crawled behind the sofa, trembling, her breathing shallow. I took the nearest thing I could find, a fireplace poker, and stood perfectly still. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. A low knock echoed through the cabin, not frantic, not desperate, calm, controlled. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I couldn't speak. The rain was falling harder now, sheets of water blurring everything beyond the window. The handle of the door rattled once, twice. "Open up," a man's voice called, low and raspy. "We just need shelter from the rain." His tone was eerily casual, but something about it felt wrong. Too steady, too confident. I didn't answer. He tried again. "Hey." I saw the light in there. "Don't be rude now." The girl whimpered from behind the couch. I turned toward her, putting a finger to my lips. Then came another sound, the unmistakable scrape of metal. He was trying to pick the lock. My chest tightened. I backed away slowly, my hand gripping the poker so tightly that my knuckles ached. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the silhouette of a man outside the window. Broad shoulders, hood pulled low, a glint of something metallic in his hand. When the thunder faded, I heard a second voice, a whisper. "She's in there. I told you. 2 of them." The door shook violently. The girl screamed. "Run," I shouted, grabbing her hand. We bolted through the narrow hallway toward the back door. My mind raced. What if it was locked? What if there was no escape? The cabin seemed to stretch endlessly, every step echoing like a countdown to disaster. Behind us, the front door splintered under a powerful kick. The men were inside. I yanked the back door open. It was jammed. Panic surged. I slammed my shoulder against it, once, twice, until it gave way, sending us tumbling into the freezing rain. "Go," I screamed, pulling the girl toward the trees. The storm blinded us. Branches whipped our faces. Mud clung to our feet. But adrenaline kept us running. I could hear their voices behind us, shouting, furious, hunting. "There, don't let them get away." The girl tripped and fell. I grabbed her arm, lifting her, but she was sobbing uncontrollably. I can't run anymore." "Yes, you can," I shouted over the rain. "Just a little farther." We reached the edge of the clearing, where the ground sloped sharply down toward the road. My car was parked at the bottom, half hidden under a blanket of rain. Salvation or so I thought. Another flash of lightning and there they were, 2 figures emerging from the storm, walking slowly toward us. The tall one in front held a knife glinting orange in the light. The girl froze. "That's him." "Run to the car," I yelled, pushing her forward. "Run to the car," I yelled, pushing her forward. I turned back to face the men, gripping the poker like a sword. My heart thundered in my chest. The tall one laughed, his voice echoing through the rain. "Brave, aren't you?" he said. "But she's ours. You shouldn't have opened that door. She's a child," I screamed. He tilted his head, not for long. He lunged. I swung the poker with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his arm, and he roared in pain. The second man rushed me, tackling me to the ground. The mud was cold and thick, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Run," I shouted again, hoping the girl was already in the car. The man's hands wrapped around my throat. His breath was hot and foul, his eyes wild with rage. I kicked, twisted, grabbed a rock, and smashed it against his face. He howled, blood mixing with rain. I pushed him off and scrambled to my feet. The girl was in the car, pounding on the window, screaming for me. I ran, slipping and sliding through the mud, just as the taller man came after me again. The car keys were in my pocket, shaking in my trembling hands. I opened the door, shoved the girl inside, and slammed the lock just as the man slammed his fist against the window. His eyes were inches from mine, cold, predatory, filled with fury. Then, from somewhere down the road, headlights appeared. The men turned. A siren wailed in the distance. The girl had called the police before. No, she couldn't have. She didn't have a phone. But someone had. The 2 men vanished into the forest as the patrol car skidded to a halt beside us. 2 officers stepped out, shouting orders, guns drawn. I collapsed against the steering wheel, trembling with relief. The girl sobbed quietly beside me, her small hand clutching mine. We were alive. For now. The patrol car's flashing lights painted the rain's trees in harsh red and blue streaks. I sank into the seat, every muscle shaking with exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. The girl leaned against me, still sobbing, her small hands gripping mine like she feared letting go would make the nightmare return. Even through the storm, I could feel the weight of what had just happened, the terror, the pursuit, the knowledge that she had been so close to disappearing forever. The officers approached cautiously, scanning the surrounding forest. "Are there any more of them?" one asked. I shook my head, still catching my breath. I don't know. They came through the front door, and I chased them out the back. That's all I know. One officer took the girl gently into his arms, wrapping her in a warm blanket. "You're safe now, sweetheart," he said softly. Her body trembled against him, but I could see a spark of relief in her eyes. She was finally safe. As we drove slowly back toward the nearest town, the storm began to subside, the rain softening to a drizzle. The girl's story unfolded between sobs and hiccups, fragmented and terrifying. She had been kidnapped by a local gang that specialized in forcing children into begging rings and criminal labor. Each day had been a struggle to survive, her captors punishing any attempt at resistance with vicious beatings. Today, she had refused yet again, and they had lashed her mercilessly, leaving her bloodied and desperate. She tried to get away, she whispered, trembling. They said if I ran, they'd make sure I never came back. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face against my shoulder. I thought I was going to die. I pressed a hand to her back, trying to soothe her. You're safe now, I promise you. Nothing will hurt you again. When we arrived at the police station, officers immediately took statements, recording every detail she could remember. They were methodical, careful, and professional. Yet I could see the tension in their eyes. They had dealt with many cases before, but the severity and cruelty of this gang left even seasoned officers shaken. They'll pay for what they've done, one officer said quietly, his jaw tight with anger. We're going after the rest of them. While the investigation began, I stayed with the girl, offering what comfort I could. We waited together in the small, sterile room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the occasional police radio crackle filling the silence. It was a far cry from the darkness of the cabin, the storm, and the terror outside. Yet, even here, the memories lingered. Every shadow, every creak in the building made me flinch, my senses still tuned to the terror we had just escaped. Hours passed. The girl finally calmed enough to eat a small meal and sip some water. I held her hand the entire time, unwilling to let her feel alone again. It was then that I realized the gravity of what had occurred. The screams, which everyone had thought were ghostly, were real. They were cries for help, pain and fear made audible in the darkness. What had seemed like a haunting was, in truth, a desperate plea from someone trapped in a living nightmare. By the early morning, the officers had successfully tracked down and apprehended the gang. 5 men were arrested, along with evidence of their cruel operations, small cages, chains, and the belongings of other children who had not been so lucky. The girl's bravery, combined with quick thinking and a small act of courage on my part, had ended their reign of terror, at least for now. The girl was placed in protective care, her safety a top priority, while investigators worked tirelessly to contact her family and ensure the other victims were found. I watched her leave the station, bundled in warm clothing, smiling faintly despite the exhaustion etched across her young face. A mixture of relief and sadness washed over me, relief that she was safe, sadness for the ordeal she had endured. As I drove home in the quiet morning, the sky clearing to reveal soft sunlight breaking through retreating clouds, I reflected on everything that had happened. The house, the screams, the legend that had drawn me here. It had been a catalyst, a coincidence that placed me in the right place at the right time. What everyone had thought was a ghost, a supernatural presence haunting the old cabin, was something far more human and horrifying. Real evil, dressed in flesh, exploiting fear for profit. I realized then that courage does not require strength, only the willingness to act when fear grips every fiber of your being. The girl's courage, my own determination, and the timely arrival of help had combined to save a life. The echo of her cries would forever remind me that sometimes what seems supernatural has its roots in the darkest corners of human nature. Weeks later, the story began to circulate quietly. The police commended me, but I refused recognition. This was never about fame or heroism. It was about survival, empathy, and the quiet understanding that the world often hides monsters in plain sight. The girl, safe now, would never have to live in fear again. That thought alone was enough to ease the weight that had pressed on my chest since that night. And though the cabin still stands, abandoned and battered by the elements, I will never return. The rain that once masked the screams has dried, the shadows have shifted, and the darkness no longer hides secrets, but I will never forget the terror I felt, the sound of her cries, and the realization that courage is born in moments. When every instinct tells you to run, this is the truth behind the story. No ghosts, no phantoms, only fear, human cruelty, and one small life saved through the unlikely bravery of 2 strangers in a storm. And in that truth, Perhaps there is hope, that light can pierce even the darkest night.